Hey everyone, my name is Scott. Welcome to the channel. I am trying to watch 366 movies this year. I'm going to fail. I'm pretty bad at time management, it turns out, but I did watch all 4 Toy Story movies, so let's talk about them. The first Toy Story is a landmark motion picture, the first feature film created entirely inside of a computer, and the first feature film from Pixar Animation Studios. And this film contains all the hallmarks you will see in Pixar films moving forward. It is an all-time classic. Here's the thing though. I watched all 4 of these films in the same day, in 2 sittings. Having seen Toy Story 1, 2, and 3 before, I haven't seen 4 as of yet. The films become more about technology than it does plot. It is strange sitting down and watching the first 3 movies I've seen before, all in one sitting, because you start to notice how Pixar has evolved over time. And having seen Pixar films of this day, going back and watching Toy Story again was a bit of a weird experience. Toy Story visually doesn't look great compared to what we have now. Then it was revolutionary, but compared to what we have now, you can start to see what they weren't able to do at that point in time. Textures are pretty flat, sets in the background are usually pretty blurry, Slinky Dog's mouth is weird, but the movie still holds up today because you can forgive all these elements because the story, the voice acting, everything about it is so good you can overlook the weird physical traits because the technology wasn't there at the time. So yeah, it's a Pixar masterpiece. Toy Story 2 looks like not a giant leap forward technologically speaking, but a small step forward in the look of Pixar's films. And part of that is because there was only a 4-year gap in between Toy Story and Toy Story 2. And while technology has probably evolved more between those 4 years, Pixar kept it in their wheelhouse. What you see in Toy Story 2 are little touches. Reflections on the wax of a floor. The film that covers the prospector's box is incredible. And they took little steps here and there throughout the entire running time of this film, so it looks a lot like the original Toy Story, but there's little tweaks along the way that kind of add to the visual flares of the film. And Toy Story 2 is the first Pixar film which really has a standout sequence in it, a sequence that reaches a new level of storytelling. My favorite Pixar films of all time are the ones that have these sort of sequences in them. Whether it's the first 10 minutes of Up, the last 20 minutes of Coco, or in Toy Story 2, the When She Loved Me sequence, these are the sequences that make Pixar, Pixar. These are the sequences that reach transcendence. And rewatching Toy Story 2 made me remember how heartbreaking that sequence is. While I was also distracted that the shot going in and out of the sequence was a reflection of Jessie in the window, just another one of those touches that Pixar brought to this movie. It's not as groundbreaking as the first film, but it's still a landmark motion picture in Pixar's filmography. Toy Story 3 hits you in the face almost immediately with what Pixar has learned over the previous 11 years. Everything about the opening of Toy Story 3 is bigger. It's got a big train sequence. It's longer shots, wider pans. Everything about it is larger. But while the technology is a step beyond what they were able to do in Toy Story 2 even, they kept it in that wheelhouse. It still feels like a small step in a direction. It still very much looks like a Toy Story film, but there are little steps here and there, leaves, lighting effects, the world being larger, that are the next step in what Pixar can do. What is hugely above and beyond in this film is Lotso. He looks amazing with his photorealistic fur. He is the standout technological marvel of Toy Story 3. And while the plot of Toy Story was about two toys getting back to their human, and the plot of Toy Story 2 is about Woody discovering that he is destined for greatness, but yet being a child's plaything is still pretty good. Toy Story 3 is very much about growing up and growing out of that phase in your life, from a human level and from a toy level. This movie's devastating. Like, the last 30 minutes or so of this film hits that transformative, that transcendent level. While kids will enjoy Toy Story 3, this is a movie for the parents. It's absolutely brutal with its storytelling. And because of that, it's not a film that I want to revisit a lot, even though it is entertaining throughout its running time and it's a fun watch. It's just emotionally overwhelming. But yeah, Pixar always brings their A game to the Toy Story series, and this movie's no different. Up to this point, Toy Stories 1, 2, and 3 all sit in a wheelhouse. They all kind of look similar. Little technological leaps here and there, but for the most part, visually, they're all kind of in the same basket. The same cannot be said about Toy Story 4. Holy crap! Seriously, if your jaw doesn't absolutely drop with the first sequence of this movie, you need to rewatch the first 3 Toy Stories and find out how far of a leap, visually speaking, Toy Story 4 is. Like I said, I had the benefit of watching all these movies in one foul swoop. This movie looks absolutely amazing. The opening sequence where they're rescuing RC from a downpour is unbelievable. If you've been watching computer animation throughout the years from 1995 until now, you might have noticed that these companies have a hard time getting water right. I mean, water's weird. It's got all the colors in the rainbow, yet it's translucent. It has weird physics. Everything about water is hard to make into something you can create in a computer. So largely, the animation companies have either ignored it completely and just not used water in their films, or made it overly cartoonish. I'm thinking of Moana. That's a very stylized look to the water. It looks good, but it's an animated water. In the opening sequence of Toy Story 4, that water is photorealistic. It is astounding. And it's not only the water hitting the window or the water hitting the ground or the water sloshing onto the street, it's also the water hitting the character models. The glistening, everything is perfect. This movie is astoundingly good at being incredibly photorealistic. And that is true throughout its entire running time. This movie looks so good, it's almost distracting. Almost distracting. It was distracting. If you're a geek like me, you're gonna sit there and you're gonna look at certain aspects and say, holy crap, the attention to detail is incredible. There's a power strip in this movie that I stared at throughout the entire scene. A power strip. It's got cobwebs, the lighting's great, everything about it is perfect and looks like a power strip in real life. There's a fight between the character voiced by Keegan-Michael Key and Jordan Peele. I was distracted by a wall. It was a concrete wall. I just stared at the wall. But having said all this about the look of the film, the plot I wasn't really into all that much. I didn't think after 3 films of Woody thinking that being a child's plaything is the best thing in the world, that the jump to, I'm gonna run off with Bo Peep, worked really well. Even this movie, there are elements of, hey, we gotta get back to Hannah. So that swap didn't work for me all that well. And also, while the movie looks great, you have these wide shots that are photorealistic of this carnival or wherever they are, Pixar understands that doing humans in a computer ends up looking Uncanny Valley-y. So what Pixar did is, instead of trying to make their human characters look photorealistic, they make them look like Pixar humans. So you have these wide shots of wherever they are, be it an antique store or a carnival, and then you have Pixar humans walking around in them. That contrast between photorealism and Pixar animation is a little off-putting. Now don't get me wrong, all the toys look photorealistic. The toys look great. They look great in their scenery. I'm talking solely about the human characters. The humans are what make you get sucked out of the film and back into thinking this is a computer animation. They're not quite there yet. So while they took gigantic technological leaps with this film, it's still not perfect. They made a movie with fewer human characters, we wouldn't have this problem. But I wasn't into the plot. It looks great, but it's a lesser Toy Story film, and the inclusion of Forky is just annoying. I love Tony Hale, but they gotta sell those toys, I guess. But just overall, a lesser Toy Story film. Still looks great. And that is it for this episode. Have you seen any of the Toy Story movies? If not, where have you been? I'll see you on the next episode. Thanks for watching.